Hi, I'm Marty Cohn, and welcome to Brattleboro Community Television's Meet the Candidates 2022. This series affords you an opportunity to hear from the folks running for elected office. Today, our guest is Representative Mike Mrowicki, who is the Democratic candidate running for Windham 4 State Representative. Welcome, Representative.
Well, thank you, Marty, and thank you to the people at BCTV. They have been ongoing, doing some great work during COVID and afterwards. I appreciate them offering this opportunity.
All right, great. Well, we're glad that you're here. Look at this mutual admiration going here. All right, let's be serious. First question: why are you seeking this office?
Yeah, well, thanks. It's a great question too. But I think Vermont's the best place I know to live, to love, to work, play, raise a family, including grandchildren, and retire to. And I want to do what I can to help keep it that way. I want to say yes to a better today and a brighter tomorrow and give back to the community that's given so much to me. When my second daughter was born, she was premature. She was in hospital, in and out for her first 2 years. And our community really stepped up and helped us in ways that I can never repay. So this is a small bit of what I'm trying to do, but in so many ways, I live in a very generous community, and I want to give back. I feel obligated to do so. And we have this opportunity in Vermont with our citizen legislature that we can live our lives at home, go to Montpelier for 18 weeks, and then come back home too. So I appreciate the voters of Windham 4 affording me that opportunity, and I look forward to continue serving them.
All right. Well, so Windham 4, you have an opponent.
That's right.
So what sets you apart from your opponent?
Sure. Big differences.
Okay.
Let's start with Prop 5, Article 22, reproductive liberty. I believe women's health care has been a basic right for 50 years now, and I don't want to take that away from them. And that's where my opponent and I disagree. And we have communicated on this, and I respect her concerns. I respect where they came from. I respect that she says she prays for me. But I disagree respectfully. These are decisions where government has no place. Government has no place in our bedrooms, in our doctor's offices, in our hospitals. Government has no place there. And especially these delicate decisions around health care, around health services. You see what's happening around the country. I don't want that in Vermont. So that's a big difference between my opponent and I. I'm also concerned with how many Republicans have become election deniers who still don't believe that Joe Biden won, and are even coming into Vermont now and asking for campaign records. You know, what an insult that is to our town clerks who work hard, to all our election volunteers to work hard. Vermont got the highest marks in the country among Secretary of States for how well our election was run and how fair it was. So when I see election denying coming up here in Vermont, that's a big difference. I also really believe that we need to face up to climate. Climate is here. Climate change is happening. It's now, and we need to do our part. Another place I really believe we need to do something about, there's a question you suggested later on, but we need common sense gun reform. We need to continue to make sure that guns don't get into the hands of the wrong people. We're seeing an increase of violence, and the first thing I think of is there's too many guns out there in the wrong hands, and that's usually handguns. And there's things we can do about that, and what I would like to do about that. The other part that I just don't understand is why people need weapons of war only used in military in a civilian capacity, guns that have one purpose, and that's to kill a lot of people in a short amount of time. I don't believe in that, and I believe I will continue to work for common sense reforms of our gun laws to make sure that law-abiding citizens aren't bothered by this, but the people who don't respect that. And we have a big problem with domestic violence and firearms in this state as well. So it's another piece. So we need red flag wars, background checks. Those red flag laws have saved some people already, and we will continue to do work around that. And lastly, I want to look at everything we do. I want Vermont to make progress, but progress through the lens of justice. We need to take into account all those things that make up the landscape of justice, and justice for all, no exceptions.
All right. So how many years have you been a state rep?
16 years.
16 years.
That's
Okay.
right.
So if you're reelected,
Yeah.
what would be your top 2 priorities
Sure.
this time around?
Well, I'm hoping we pass Article 22, Prop 5, reproductive liberty. And we've got to do some things to build on that too. Because what we're seeing in other states is there are states like Texas, Ohio, Florida. They not only want to pass laws in their states, they're trying to reach into other states. And let's say somebody from Ohio, like that poor 10-year-old that was raped and had to go out of state. Now they want to charge the doctor who provided the health services for that poor 10-year-old. We want to make sure that doesn't happen. Connecticut just passed a law around this. They're a full-time legislature, and we're not. And that's one of the things. The other thing is to help create safe haven for both doctors and for women who feel like they have to travel out of state. That's a big one.
One more.
Climate.
You get one more. I asked for the top 2.
Sure, that's 2. Climate's a big one. And, it's where we really need the governor to be on board with us. We passed the Climate Solutions Act, and the governor vetoed it. We were able to override that veto, but then this year we started to implement some of those pieces. The Clean Heat Standards Bill. This is a bill that would have helped people save money with the carbon fuels rising to the levels they are. They would have been able to save money, and the governor vetoed that bill. We missed an override by 1 vote, and this is right on the ground level. It's going to help people. And I'll give you an example. I switched a couple of years ago. I used to burn 5 cords of wood a year. And a couple, 3 years ago, we put in a heat pump. Now I burn about 1 cord a year, which is just supplemental when we want that cozy fire. If you take the electricity costs now and compare that to what it would cost if I bought 5 cords of wood, we're spending half of what we would have. This was something we're trying to make available to Vermonters across the state, and the governor vetoed that bill. That's just one example where the changes we want to make to address climate also have some real economic benefits, along with the jobs they're going to create. And I know that there's concerns from gas companies and oil companies that there are jobs that are going to be lost, but some of those oil companies now are starting to make the transition. They're selling the heat pumps. They're looking at ways that they can promote efficiency and transitioning, and that's what we want them to do. It's going to take a while to transition, but we have to. We're talking about our grandkids here before. That's we want to leave them a better world, and that's one way we can do that.
Well, let's continue talking about the climate crisis, because that's something that's reshaping life here in Vermont, especially over the coming decades. And you mentioned about the climate action plan.
That's right.
That was bad. Which piece of that climate action plan would you like to take up if you're reelected?
Sure, we have to look at it all.
Okay.
This is not a pick and choose. We have to get our house in order. Let's start with our houses. The biggest part of Vermont's carbon footprint is home heating and transportation. What we can do with making our homes more efficient and using different heat sources will go a long way to saving money and lowering our carbon footprint. Similarly with transportation, we really don't have a statewide transportation system. The Transportation Climate Initiative is a multi-state effort that wants to bring states the kind of revenue they need to do things. And in a state like Vermont, it'll give us the resources that we wouldn't have otherwise. And that would help us with increasing bus service, for instance. Let's say we created light rail going up years ago, Senator Bob Gannett, when he was still alive, reminded me that he grew up in Putney on Old Depot Road, and there was a depot at the end of the road where the train stopped and took him to Brattleboro High School.
Wow.
We need that kind of old-time common sense again with what we can bring forward for transportation options. Electric cars are great, but they're really expensive right now. The President's Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of climate actions in there, and there's going to be significant funds to help with the purchase of EVs and the money for the infrastructure, the charging stations. But I think until we get to the second generation of cars where they're much more inexpensive, that people like me aren't going to be able to afford them. So we need to look at the whole picture there in regards to transportation. But heating, transportation, those are the two big pieces of climate that we need to focus on.
All right. Let me ask you about another one, that the rising costs of food, fuel, other goods, definitely impacting Vermonters. And what can you do as a state representative to address that issue?
Sure. I'll go back to the Clean Heat Standards bill. That would have lowered people's heating costs this winter coming forward. As I said, my heating bill was cut in half when I switched from wood to a heat pump. It's really unfortunate the governor vetoed that bill. And you know, it's tough to work in a situation where, for all the good things the governor did with COVID, there's these other pieces that make it really difficult. And you know, he's vetoed more bills than any governor out there. And so we got to figure out how to work together on these things, or else it's not going to happen. But that's one piece: home heating, more carpooling, more public transportation, so people don't have to drive as much. And again, EVs are an option for some people, but not everybody. We look at our food costs, the price of meat especially, and what we're finding out is that right now, food processors are a monopoly headed up by only 4 companies nationwide. Mm-hmm. We need to work with Congress and push them to enact the antitrust laws that we have, or to make tougher ones. The bigger problem with that is it's not only hurting consumers, but producers are not getting the prices they need to keep in business. So these monopolies who are running the meat processing firms, we need to rein them in. And this is where I think it's going to be great to have Becca Ballant in Washington, because we need to have that connection. We have a good one with Peter Welch, with Senator Leahy, and with Senator Sanders. It's going to be even stronger, I think, with Senator Ballant. It's those kind of big things we need to do. The other piece in regards to food is we need to keep focusing on local. People complain sometimes that local produce is more expensive, and it is. But the way prices are going now, that gap is closing. And the more we can get people to grow local, we know where the source of our food is then. We know that it's good food, and the prices will come down. So that's another piece. The other piece, agriculture plays a big role in climate action too. When we have regenerative soil practices, when we have our woodlands used in an efficient way, we're keeping the carbon where we want it. So that's another aspect of local agriculture that we need to support.
Well, so what happens is a lot of the issues, they're interrelated. I mean, it's not coming up. So one that you kind of touched on a little bit was when we look at the housing crisis in Vermont, in terms of how do we attract people if there isn't a house for them? What can you as a state rep do to address the housing crisis in Vermont?
Housing is another one of those multifaceted pieces that touches so many. We have workforce issues. I can give you an example. The principal at Putney Central School had to hire 15 people to start this new year. And he did. But he told me a number of the people he offered jobs to had to turn them down because they couldn't find housing within a drivable distance of Putney. These are the people to teach in our schools. So wasn't all of them, wasn't 15, but it was enough that it made a difference. And as you know, you don't have to go far to see the help wanted signs up and down our state. So we need housing for that. One of the things I have been supporting and continue, we have an entity, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, that has been in business for a couple of decades now. And the way this was originally set up was really a good thing. And I've talked with legislators from other states where conservation and housing are often at odds with each other. And we brought them together because they are connected too. Now, they are the entity that looks at projects around the state and funnels money down to where it can be best used. Locally, that's Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, and they continue to do some amazing work to bring affordable housing online here, including we're trying to get something going in Putney here. And it's interesting, I think some people have a bias to what affordable housing is. We can call it workforce housing, but as we know, our workforce is connected to the housing market now. My understanding is the project in Putney is going to have an income range for who can live there between $16,000 a year and $70,000 a year. That's what we call affordable housing. Now, $70,000, I wish I was anywhere near $70,000, but that's what we're looking at. A couple who are two teachers, they're going to be over $100,000, but they still can't find housing.
Right.
So we want the housing trusts to continue to do the work, but the next thing we need to do is we need to, I think, foster private-public partnerships. And we took a big step last year, and I think we're going to look further. And we passed another bill that would have looked at the condition of current rental housing stock. It would have loosened some things in Act 250, which a lot of people blame for why it takes so long. The governor vetoed that too. Now, that bill gave the governor a lot what he asked for, and anyone who's been doing this knows you don't always get what you want.
Right.
The old Rolling Stones song.
Right.
Can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, we're going to keep trying. Because we think that's a good bill. We understand we're probably going to have to make some changes in Act 250 to make it easier for builders to put up single-family homes, to more congregate housing. The other piece that we're doing is the state has created a planning tool called Smart Growth. What we're trying to do is move away from sprawl and concentrate our housing developments in clustered village where we can utilize better use of the utilities. It'll create the need for less cars, less driving, and in that way it's a climate action. And it's cheaper to build when you're doing it in a way that's more concentrated. So those are a few of the things we can do in regard to housing.
All right, great. All right, so another issue, and you kind of touched on this in your opening answer. In terms of enhancing public safety and reducing violence throughout Vermont, it's not. I'm not saying Wyndham County here, but this is a statewide issue. How would you address that?
Sure, there's a health concern that's related to that, and we can't address substance abuse and addiction in a vacuum. It's a bigger part, and that's a lot of what we're talking about. That a lot of crime we have here is related to drug use, and what I want to continue working on is getting more treatment centers out there, and we need more residential treatment centers. The standard right now is medicated assisted treatment, where basically somebody goes, it's outpatient treatment. Doesn't work for everybody. And I think long term, we're going to need to have more inpatient treatment, and hopefully the retreat can be part of that, because they've got the facility, they've got the experience. We have to look at that. I go back to what I said earlier about common sense gun reforms. Where there's drugs, there's money. Where there's money, there's guns. And we need to get those guns off the street. And that's where I feel like common sense gun reform can look a little differently in different places. If you're talking about Chicago, you're talking in a different way, or New York. Vermont has some of the same problems, though, and we can learn from what's happening in other states, and we have to. I think there's too many guns out there, and we're not talking about hunting guns or even target shooting guns. Most Vermonters own firearms. Vermont is still a hunting state, and I have all the respect in the world for that. If you've worked on a farm, you've had to use, as I have, when you butcher, you're often using a firearm for that. There's lots of uses that make a lot of sense. But when it comes to handguns and these military-style weapons, I don't understand that, and one of the things we need to look at. Another piece that I think about is how can we reform law enforcement right now? And we've had some real good examples locally. When Keith Clark was the chief up in Bellows Falls, he was one of the first to bring a social worker onto the police force. In that year, arrests went down 50%. That same social worker now is embedded in the state police barracks in Westminster. That's the direction to go. We need more social workers. We need people who can de-escalate situations before they get to the point where law enforcement has to come in and the line gets crossed about a crime being committed. We need more of those resources here. And I think that combination of better and different training for police, for law enforcement people right now, adding more social workers into that mix is one way we can address this big picture and get at those root causes, which in many cases is untreated trauma. And that could be a whole other show we could do, but right. That's a big piece of this.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for bringing up, and on behalf of my wife and my youngest daughter, who are social workers,
yes.
Thank you for recognizing the value of what they do. All right, Mike, after 16 years, what do you want voters to know about you?
Sure. They can know that I'm going to be there for them. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work smart. I'm going to listen. And they can know my values. And that starts with justice. And justice for all. One of the big pieces we didn't talk about right now, but Vermont can hold a light up for how we treat women, how we treat BIPOC Vermonters, how we treat LGBTQ plus Vermonters, and all marginalized communities. Vermont's doing a good job, and we can do better. And that's part of the justice piece that I want people to know about me. There's economic justice. The disparities in income right now just continue to grow. It's, I think, the largest disparities since the Gilded Age. And that's a bigger piece that we can do something about, and I'm going to be working for. There's environmental justice too, that climate change is real, it's here, it's now, and we have to do something. So that's something I want people to know. But I also want them to know that at the ground level, the work for them is just as important as the policy level up here, whether it's getting a stop sign replaced, whether it's helping keep the Dummerston DMV office open so we don't have to go to Springfield or further to do that. Those are the kinds of things that I've done and will continue to do, because that ground level constituent work is just as important as the policy work that we do. So I want people to know that I'm going to be there for them for that. And like them, I think this is a great place to live, work, play, raise a family, and retire to. And I want to help keep it that way. The last thing I want to say is I want people to say yes when they vote for me. You know, our opponents have become the party of no. Democracy, no. Common sense gun reforms, no. Vaccines and vaxes, no. I'm saying yes to democracy, yes to women's rights, women's health care, yes to climate, yes to common sense gun reform. And I want people, when they go to the polls, to vote yes on those ballot issues, Prop 2, Prop 5, and vote blue and vote for Mike.
All right. Representative Mike Mrowicki, a Democratic candidate for Windham 4 state representative. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
All right. You can learn more about Mike by visiting his campaign website, windham4.online. The general election is November 8th. Remember, you could vote early. You could vote absentee by mail. You could vote absentee hand-delivered on Election Day. Whichever way it works for you, please vote. Thanks for watching Meet the Candidates 2022. I'm Marty Cohn. Stay healthy.